The call came on an ordinary Tuesday evening while I was finalizing seating arrangements for my wedding. My phone lit up with Dad, and a familiar wave of both warmth and unease washed over me. My father, George Parker, had never been easy to read, warm one moment, distant the next. But I was optimistic this time. He hadn't missed a single wedding planning update so far, and I hoped he was calling to confirm our final rehearsal details. "Hey, Dad," I answered cheerfully, balancing my laptop on my knees. His voice was heavy. "Jesse, we need to talk." I froze. "What's wrong?" There was a strained silence on the other end. I'm not coming to the wedding." His words hit me like a slap. "What?" My throat tightened. I'm going to Hawaii with Stephanie." His voice faltered. "We leave the day before your wedding." For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. "You're choosing a vacation with Stephanie over walking me down the aisle?" My voice trembled. "Jesse, it's complicated," he sighed. "I didn't want it to be like this." "Then don't make it like this," I snapped, anger bubbling beneath my shock. "You promised me. After everything we've been through, you promised you'd be there." "I'm sorry," he whispered, barely audible. Tears burned in my eyes. I ended the call without another word, my hands shaking. Stephanie, his favorite, the perfect daughter, the one who could do no wrong. Even now, after years of trying to rebuild our strained relationship, he still chose her. The following days passed in a blur. My fiancé, Ethan, tried to be supportive, but even he couldn't hide his disbelief. "Why would he do this now?" he asked one night, holding me close as I sobbed into his shoulder. I had no answer, but I needed one. A week later, still reeling, I made the mistake of checking Stephanie's Instagram. There she was, beaming in a beach selfie with our dad, captioned, "Counting down to paradise with the best man I know. Can't wait for our adventure, Dad." I stared at the screen, seething. It wasn't just a vacation. It was a celebration, a public display of the bond they shared, while I was left behind like I meant nothing. Fueled by rage, I grabbed my phone and fired off a text to Dad. "You owe me an explanation." Days passed without a reply. The silence crushed me more than his betrayal ever could. Then, one rainy Friday evening, my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Is this Jessica Parker?" A woman's calm, professional voice asked. "Yes. Who's this?" "This is Dr. Evelyn Grant from Westlake Medical Center. We have your father here. He's asked for you." My heart stopped. Is he okay?" The line crackled with static. "It's serious. He's requested you come as soon as possible." My breath hitched. I didn't ask how or why. I just grabbed my keys and ran out the door, fear gripping me like a vice. Whatever this was, I knew one thing. My father was hiding more than I ever imagined. The hospital's cold, sterile air hit me the moment I stepped inside, tightening the already suffocating grip on my chest. My shoes squeaked against the polished floors as I rushed toward the reception desk, barely able to get the words out. I'm here for George Parker. He's my father." The receptionist gave me a sympathetic look. "Room 314. I see you. Take the elevators to the 3rd floor." My heart pounded as I hurried down the endless corridor, my thoughts a tangled web of fear, anger, and confusion. What could be so serious that he'd send for me after cutting me out of his life so coldly? When I reached room 314, I froze. Through the small window on the door, I saw Stephanie sitting by Dad's bed, her head bowed, shoulders trembling. Her perfect composure, always her defining feature, was gone. She was crying. I pushed the door open, and she jerked her head up, eyes wide and red-rimmed. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice hoarse. "The hospital called me." I snapped, stepping inside. My gaze locked on Dad, frail and pale against the stark white sheets, wires snaking across his body. "What's going on?" Stephanie rose from the chair, crossing her arms protectively. "You shouldn't be here." "Excuse me?" My voice rose despite myself. "They called me." "What's wrong with him?" Before she could answer, a rasping voice cut through the tension. "Jesse, you came." Dad's eyes fluttered open, his voice thin and strained. His once strong presence now seemed diminished, almost fragile. I rushed to his side, gripping his cold, bony hand. I'm here, Dad." Stephanie stood frozen, her face a mask of conflict. She opened her mouth, but Dad weakly squeezed my hand, cutting her off. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he whispered. "Find out what?" My voice cracked. "What's happening?" He closed his eyes, gathering strength. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer," he said slowly. Like each word was a boulder he had to push uphill. "They gave me months, weeks now." The room tilted around me. My knees buckled, and I grabbed the bed's edge to steady myself. No, that can't be right." "I didn't want you to know," he rasped. "Didn't want to ruin your wedding." "Ruin my wedding?" My voice trembled with anger and disbelief. "You thought this would be better? Disappearing, letting me think you didn't care." His hand tightened around mine, surprisingly strong. "I thought I was sparing you." Tears blurred my vision. "Sparing me? You broke me." Stephanie let out a shuddering breath. "He didn't tell you because of me." Her voice wavered. I spun around, fury igniting. "You knew? This whole time? While I was falling apart thinking he chose you over me?" Tears streamed down her face. He wanted to fix things with me, before it was too late." Her words hit me like a punch. Fix things with her. After everything, he still chose her first. "I'm your daughter too," I whispered, choking back sobs. "Why wasn't I worth fixing things with?" Dad's breath hitched, his eyes pleading. "You were never broken." The room fell into silence, broken only by the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Stephanie's quiet sobs filled the space between us, raw and exposed. For the first time, I saw her differently. Not as the perfect daughter, but as someone just as lost, just as desperate for his love. And maybe, just maybe, he was trying to give us both what we needed before time ran out. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital visits, endless cups of cold coffee, and restless nights spent in uncomfortable waiting room chairs. Stephanie and I fell into an uneasy truce, bound together by the crushing reality that our father's time was running out. Despite everything, I couldn't shake the resentment simmering beneath the surface. She'd known. She'd been given precious time with him while I was left in the dark, believing I didn't matter. That wound festered, even as we sat side by side at Dad's bedside, watching his life slip away piece by piece. One night, just past midnight, I returned from the hospital cafeteria carrying 2 cups of watery coffee. Stephanie was standing by the window, staring blankly at the city lights. "I brought you one," I said stiffly, setting the cup on the table beside her. "Thanks." Her voice was barely a whisper. I hesitated but finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her shoulders tensed, and for a moment, I thought she'd lash out. Instead, she turned, her face pale and hollow. "Because I was selfish." The raw honesty caught me off guard. I thought, if I had him to myself, even for a little while, maybe I could fix what we lost. Her voice broke. I didn't want to share him, not after spending my whole life feeling like he never really saw me. Her words hit something deep inside me, something I'd buried for years. I'd always thought she was the favorite, the one Dad loved more. But hearing her now, I realized we'd both been chasing his love in different ways. "I hated you," I admitted, my voice trembling. "When he chose you, it felt like I was nothing." Stephanie let out a strangled laugh, wiping her face. "Funny. I thought you were the one he always believed in. The one who didn't need him the way I did." For the first time, I saw her clearly. Not as the perfect, favored daughter, but as someone just as broken, just as desperate for connection. We stood there in silence, 2 sisters bound by the same ache, finally understanding that we'd been fighting for a love that had always been too complicated to define. 3 days later, Dad passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by both of us. His last words were simple but seared into my heart. Take care of each other. The morning of my wedding dawned bright and clear. A day I'd once dreaded but now faced with quiet acceptance. Ethan waited for me at the altar, his expression filled with love and patience. I walked down the aisle alone, holding tightly to a small locket Dad had given me years ago. Felt like he was there, steadying me with every step. At the front row, Stephanie stood, her eyes brimming with tears. Not out of guilt or regret, but something deeper, something real. As the ceremony ended and Ethan and I turned to face our loved ones, Stephanie was the first to step forward, wrapping me in a tight, tearful embrace. We didn't say anything, we didn't need to. Dad's final gift wasn't choosing one of us over the other. It was bringing us together, showing us that family isn't about being first, but about being there. Even when it seems too late. Sometimes it's not. Did this twist surprise you? Like the video and stay tuned for more unforgettable stories.